Industry Angel Podcast. We hear from the best business minds across the globe, entrepreneurs, social influencers, marketing mavens, and sales rock stars. We've got them all. Here comes your weekly dose of inspiration with your host, Ian Farrar.
And we are back. Welcome in the afternoon for a change, because the afternoon is what you called for. We did a poll last week. We did a poll on LinkedIn, and the results were 60-40. So 60% of you wanted this in the afternoon, and 40% wanted it in the morning. So drop me a comment, please, because I've just realized the volume was up massively loud, so I might have blew your eardrums out. So let me know how I sound, if that's okay. I've got some shout outs. Today we are sponsored by Boomerang Healthcare, a certified domiciliary care provider in the Northeast. So thanks to the team there. And they actually supported us through lockdown as well, kept us going in terms of sponsorship. So thanks for that. You remember our online summits, don't you? During the lockdown. Remember the April 1st one, the 9 hours, 16 speakers we did. They're still online. They can still be viewed on your social platforms, your weapon of choice, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. You can watch again. And we've got a great journey for you today. Another great interview. Hi, Katie. Nice of you to join us. I sound great. Thanks very much. I don't look great, though. Monday. Whose idea is this on a Monday? You know what I mean? Especially not a Monday morning. Malcolm Seton said we should go live. Can't even say it. 6 or 7 o'clock. Like, really? I think I've seen 6 o'clock once or twice, and I probably was on a flight. So that's not happening, Malcolm. Peter Neal, Lauren McWilliams, thanks for your feedback. Neil Henry, presentation genius, Simon Raybould, of course. Dawn Dunn, Graham Rabbit, kombucha expert John Chilton, thanks for that. And we must say happy birthday to Micro Biz champion, Tony Robinson, OBE. So thanks for everything you do, Tony, for small businesses. And we're going to get you back on the show very soon. Thanks, Bryn, for your comment. Looking trimmed. Thanks, brother. Yes. Yeah, well, you know, my son's a barber. So, you know, what do? You take advantage, yeah? If you leave an Apple review, please let me know so I can thank you. Remember, Apple reviews really help us get found. Hi, Peter. Good. Thanks for joining us. John Mew, thanks again for joining us. You remember John was one of our guests and recently did a great podcast interview with Chris Thrall. So I suggest you take a look at that. Who else have we got joining us? That was it. That's good. What else do I have to say? Thanks, Misha, for organising all of this anyway at very short notice, as per usual. And yes, I think that was it. So you've got a great guest for you today, another great entrepreneurial journey for you. I can see her in the green room. I can see there's no children there, which I was expecting some children in the background because you've been watching Paw Patrol. So let me bring our guest in then. Today's guest grew up in Newcastle, but moved away to study chemistry at Oxford. She went on to working in London, doing finance, where she did a few wine-related qualifications. There's a hint in there for today. When herself and her husband moved back to Gateshead, and they set up Laneberg Wine, Tyneside first urban winery. Welcome to the Industry Angel, Elise Lane.
Hi. Hello. Yeah, the children aren't in shot. No, they're in the garden playing with their grandparents and their cousins and their dad, so it's fine.
Well, you've kicked them out, essentially. That's what you're saying. Yeah, don't enter the house. That's what we'll be half an hour. It's fine. How have you been finding things?
Yeah, we're all right. It's like slowly getting back to normal, isn't it? And it's hard to remember what it was like when we're just confined to our homes. But it was hard then, and it was hard to keep a business running during that time. But I do have an assistant. I have one assistant, Liam, who's he's probably doing deliveries right now. And he was amazing because we would get all the online orders in, and then I'd do everything from home, and then he'd be down at the winery packing up the boxes of wine and sending them off via courier or getting in his car and driving around to drop them off for people. But we're still doing that at the moment, but it's obviously now there's more and more people aren't in when you because people are starting to get back to work, aren't they? So yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, listen, before you jump into deliveries and dropping off wine, let's wind it back, because reading your bio, reading your bio, it's interesting because chemistry at Oxford, and then a decade of finance, and then you move back up here to the northeast, and then it's winery. So let's take it right back. Let's take it right back to the chemistry days.
So, well, I grew up here, and I went to Gosforth High, as it was known then, 20 odd years ago. And I applied for chemistry at Oxford just because I had an inspirational teacher there who suggested it. It's not something that was generally the route for a state school girl in the northeast, but it was a good opportunity, and I went down there. And while I was there, I actually did it was a chemistry of wine tasting evening, which probably you would only find in a kind of academic setting. I would say it was quite full of these people really passionate about chemistry and wine, and we were brought around various chemicals and then opened a few wines, and you would smell the chemical compounds and then smell the wine, and you'd be like, yep, that is definitely in that wine. And it sparked my interest, because it's like, how is this kind of amazing thing happening with grapes turning into these flavors that aren't grape flavors, which is like all different wines have, and it's all chemistry. So it kind of it really sparked my interest. But then I didn't. I mean, the English wine industry is quite young. I mean, it's been going for a long time, but it kind of burst onto the scene a little bit in the last kind of 10 to 15 years because of all of the climate change that has meant that we're more similar to champagne. So all the sparkling wines came up. So it wasn't really something that popped into my brain as a career choice when I left Oxford. So I went to wear a suit in London instead, and spent a lot of time advising on commercial projects and things like that. So I built up some business experience and did some wine tasting qualifications. And it was while I was doing those that I realised that I could apply my stuff to winemaking. So I actually applied for a postgraduate qualification at Plumpton College, which is in East Sussex. They're the only place you can learn how to make wine in this country now. It's right in the heart of the kind of winemaking area of the country. Although there are, now that I found out, vineyards everywhere. So they're not just confined to the south. There are vineyards. We've bought grapes from Leicestershire before, and there are actually vineyards near York and Sheffield. So, it's getting further and further north. It's not quite up here yet, so kind of jumping ahead. But yeah, we don't grow the grapes up here. We buy them. But yeah, that's kind of how it happened. So I quit my job in London and did my my postgraduate diploma. And then we moved back up here, set up an Urban Winery. And the Urban Winery was inspired by things, Urban Wineries in London. So I came back up here in 2017 with my little boy, Max, who's my oldest. He's 6 now, so he's gone back to school tomorrow. And yeah, we set it up.
You talked about wine tasting qualifications, and I was laughing because I think a few of our viewers and friends of the industry, Angel, have been wine tasting for quite some time, and maybe you could pass a few qualifications. What does that actually look like?
So I did WSET levels 2 and 3, which are the Wine and Spirits Education Trust. So it was kind of strange because I lived on Bermondsey Street, in London, in southeast London. So the first year I was in London, I lived on Bermondsey Street, and the WSET are actually based on that street in London, near London Bridge. And I kind of kept walking past it and going, oh, what's that? And then I finally booked in on a couple of courses. And honestly, it's like, if you do the intensive ones, the first one is 3 days. The second one I did was 5 days. I honestly, it's so intensive, tasting that many wines. You learn everything about every single region around the world. It's really interesting if you've got any geography interest and wine interest. But I have to say, even for me, as passionate about wine as I am, it was quite a lot to get through in terms of wine. But you get through it, and then you do some exams at the end of the week, and then you get given these kind of wine tasting qualifications. And I think it's the leading education place for doing kind of wine tasting things, but I knew at the time that it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I think most people would go on to do either like become a sommelier, or maybe people who work in a very fancy restaurant would send their staff to do that course so that they know a lot when they're actually serving their customers and things. But I knew that I didn't want to buy and sell wine, although I do obviously now, but I didn't want to buy and sell other people's wine. What I really wanted to do was make it. So yeah.
A sommelier? Sommelier.
So the guy who, or lady, who will match your wine to your food at the restaurant, but they're so knowledgeable, know everything there is to know about.
Almost as knowledgeable as my friend here, who apparently used to live just off Tooley Street.
Yes, yeah. So Tooley Street, yeah. So my office was on Tooley Street, and I lived around the corner on Bermondsey Street. Yeah.
So you see all these wine tasting things, and the sloshing it around the mouths, and the smelling it, and the getting the length, and the bouquet, and the spit in the bucket. Is that what it's like? Yeah,
it was when I was doing that. Yeah, and I think that's got its place, but I think it wasn't my thing, and that's kind of what when I set up Laneberg Wine, it was some of what I wanted to take away from wine tasting. So what I suppose I can bring is, when we talk about our wines in particular, is how they were made. So it takes away a bit of that mystique, but also I just want to take away that kind of that feeling that it's a special club you have to be in to know about wine, because I think everybody's taste buds are different, everybody's kind of experience in life's different, and wines can be different from day to day as well. And I think like being told what a wine should taste like isn't the way we want to do it. We want to like let people discover it for themselves. If they like it or they don't like it, I'd like them to say. But also, if I'm not going to tell them that, this wine tastes of apricots, because if they taste peaches, then that's fine. Or if they even taste like apples or something different, then it's absolutely fine. One thing I discovered with one of our first wines was that I had like quite a lot of experts kind of taste them, and their tasting notes were, similar, but not exactly the same. They would pick up different things. And I think sometimes it can be quite off-putting for somebody who hasn't studied a wine qualification or doesn't know a lot about it to even like approach the idea of a wine tasting, because in case they're like called upon to say what it tastes like, or in case they're made to seem like they don't know what they're talking about, or they're silly. And I think actually, wine it's a lovely drink that can be enjoyed responsibly, and it should just be about what you want to do, whether you enjoy it or what you think about it. If you want to get involved with trying to pick out what it tastes like, then that's fine. But if you don't, then that's also fine, I think.
So you've jumped into Laneberg there, Elise. You've been in London. You've done the finance. How was finance for you? Was it just not floating your boat, or was it steady away, but you always had an inkling? Or
it was
will not be watching. Go for it. Don't worry.
Oh well, to be 100% honest, what it was I took 6 months off when I had Max, and my husband took 6 months. We both worked at the same place, so we were able to share that parental leave. And I went back after 6 months, and it wasn't that I didn't want to work there or do that work. It was that I thought, if I'm going to be doing something for the rest of my life and I have to balance that with my family, I want to do something that I'm passionate about, and I want to do and it was always in the back of my mind that I wasn't using my chemistry degree. And I trained as a chemist, and I was interested in it. It was my kind of what made my brain tick, was that kind of problem solving and stuff, and I think that's what it was. And then just thinking about it, I was like, yeah, the winemaking is going to be absolutely what I want to do. Fantastic. So it wasn't anything bad about the job that I had before. It was more that it just wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But it was
everybody under the bus. You were a good girl. They're probably still connected to you on LinkedIn, so
Oh, I don't mind. It's fine.
Well, that's good, and it's interesting. We've had a lot of people on the show who have followed their passion, and we've got a comment there from our Bryn. Bryn followed his passion after his police career to his company, which is all about gin. And actually, Bryn's been on the show before, and it's interesting what he says there is that people can taste something different at different times of the day.
Mm-hmm. I think it all depends on what you've eaten before, or just how you're feeling. Like if so, I don't know if you like, you know, if you've been slightly blocked up or like your nose, and like you'll taste something different than somebody else, and it even might be something mild, and it will affect your taste buds. If you've been drinking coffee all day, it'll obviously affect them, that kind of thing. So yeah.
So we've gone from London then, we've got to Gateshead. You and your hubby decided this is what we're going to do. How does that start, Elise, from ground zero then?
Well, actually, when we moved, so we moved in 2017, I was pregnant with Reuben, who's now 2.5. So it was just a lot of kind of planning. When could we start this? When was a reasonable time after that? So I spent a lot of the pregnancy doing the business planning. So my background in finance, it was like lots of financial modelling, lots of spreadsheets, speaking to it like architects and things like that. I didn't need to use an architect in the end, but it was more about understanding what space I needed for the winery. So if you go like to, you know, some old traditional wineries, you can find quite small cramped spaces where people have had to fit their equipment in, but a lot of, like say in France, a lot of the time they have just built themselves a kind of big warehouse now to put it all in. So it's not as romantic as you generally would have imagined. But it was all about like, so how much room do I need to make this amount of bottles, and I need to make this amount of bottles because I need to cover my overheads, and that kind of financial planning went into it. Getting the licenses that I needed to get, so I needed to get wine producers license, I needed to get like wholesalers and premises licenses. Or so basically it was just a lot of work to do that, contacting various property agents to find like the right premises for a winery. And there are things to think about in terms of like, well, actually, if you wanted it to be in the middle of the town so that you could have footfall, then you're going to not have as great transport links for when the grapes come in, and the rents will be higher and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of kind of logistical things to think about. And so in the end, we're kind of plumped for the Team Valley because perfect for transport links, really great big spaces, big roller doors, lots of parking, that kind of thing. And it just was actually a practicality thing, and affordable as well. And because at the moment, it was more to do with like getting that space and being able to get the equipment in there and make the wine, and then think about like where it was sold once it was made, if you know what I mean.
How many's in the team now, Elise?
Well, there's just me and Liam. I was able to employ Liam last October, so that was for our second vintage. I was able to employ him on a permanent basis, and we rely. He's my cousin, in actual fact, because he was helping out volunteering beforehand, and he was doing such a cracking job that I got him on full time and or permanent. And most of the time when we're doing a busy period, so there's lots of lulls, there's ups and downs in what you need work to do in terms of actual physical winemaking. There's a big chunk of time in the autumn when we're grape processing. There's a big chunk of time in the spring when we're bottling. In between, it's much less labour intensive. So for those periods of time, I've just been absolutely so lucky to have had all my family and sort of friends around who've come and helped, like putting truckloads of grapes through crusher destemmers and all that kind of thing. So it's really cool. It's been really nice, actually. In actual fact, it's perfect because my dad has two brothers, so there's the three of them and their kids, and they all just come and help us out. So I say they're kids, they're my age, they're closer to my age than adults, but yeah.
Going back to your business plan was really interesting. I think what pricked my ears, it was literally, this is how many bottles of wine we need to sell to kind of break even or make a profit. Is that what I know? There's lots of operational costs and everything, but is that something, a metric that you keep your eye on?
It is, yeah. So that's one of our main like KPIs, so to speak, is to like, it's basically to try and get the best kind of per bottle contribution of the on the overheads, because they're the fixed costs. Like gross profits are always okay in that sense, but it's your building costs and stuff like that. Like grape costs are there, but they're kind of, you know, they're okay. That, I mean, you've got to keep your eye on them, but you can you've got some control over that, because you can sort of barter the cost, or not buy as much, or go for a cheaper variety or something like that. But obviously our fixed costs are there, so that's why I really want to go for an expansion, because we need to like get up to our capacity as soon as we can, so that we can then be a sustainable business. And it's really difficult to do that in winemaking.
Let's talk about grapes then. So you mentioned that there's places in the UK that grow grapes and actually to be coming further north. What does that look like? I'm going to show my absolute grape ignorance here. You know, are they heated under a false greenhouse? Are they outside? How does it work?
They're all outside. So they're all generally what someone does when they want to start a vineyard. They would have, if they're going to do it like exactly right. So, and obviously you don't always get the ability to be able to do it exactly right. You would try and pick a site that had kind of the best aspect, the best soil, the best kind of the least frost risk. Frost risk is massive in this country, and all that kind of thing. And then you would usually want to like get a consultant to come in and help you like plant the right varieties in the right places, and so all the rows are planted. But a lot of the time it's like people who've got like a big house and it's got a bit of land in the back, and they go, oh, do you know what, I'm just going to plant some Chardonnay back here, because there's, you know, people are going on about their kind of English sparkling wine. So there's a bit of a mixture between those two things. I think most of it's fairly commercial now though, and I think there's about 400 vineyards. There's far more vineyards in this country than there are wineries. I know that, because a lot of people are either selling their grapes to someone like me, or to somebody like another winery that has its own vineyard but needs more grapes, or they'll send it to a winery to be contract wine made, and then they'll get their own labels on it. So there's a few places that do it that way around. Something we could have considered doing. We might consider doing that in the future when we've got kind of our equipment in place that makes our process more efficient. But
so you've got
more money.
Got quite a few potential suppliers of grapes.
Yeah.
How would you evaluate them? Do you go down and sample their grapes? Is it like that?
So what I do is, usually it's a case of talking to them on the phone and over email first, seeing what they've got available, seeing if they know what they're kind of talking about, if they're talking about the right things, if they sound, and looking at what wines they've made in the past, whether their wines are good, and it's really just to do with speaking to them, and you can really get a feel for how good someone is as a viticulturist, or a vineyard owner, just by talking to them, because they'll ask you the right questions, and then you go and visit them after that. But I wouldn't try the grapes, because the grapes at this point are sour and like not ready. So, but yeah, we would get. I mean, if we were closer to the time, if I lived closer to where the grapes are, I'd be there probably more often, and I'd be doing that. But I'm trusting them, because they're the experts in that side of things.
So the grapes come up to the northeast here. What's the time scales then from receiving them to getting them processed? Is it like all hands to the pump to get them in quick before they kind of go off? Or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So basically it'll be picked one day. We'll put them on, we use the pallet network actually. So we put them in like 330 kilogram pallet boxes, which doesn't squash them too much. Because picking time is the end of September to the end of October, it's quite cool. So usually they'll pick that up at like 5 o'clock. It'll get on the back of the lorry up here. It'll be cool. It doesn't need a refrigerator truck or anything like that. It'll stay nice and cold. And then they'll get off the lorry at first thing in the morning at the winery down the Team Valley, and we'll get them processed straight away. So really quickly. And it always seems to be slightly on the manic side, but we make sure we get plenty of people. It's good fun though. It is good fun.
I can imagine. What's the environment like? At least is it very much like is it like a lab kind of environment, or are you all suited and stuff, or is it much more like brewery kind of stuff? I don't know.
It's more like brewery. I would say, like, imagine a really clean factory. Okay. So it's like so we have got a lab area which is like clean and for lab work, but then we've got the winery has to be clean and it's not a sterile environment because most things will be killed by the alcohol, and we use certain agents to kind of kill anything that would get into the wine that might spoil it. But we all wear our overalls, but that's to, it's not necessary to protect the person's clothes, because I get that a lot. It's like, oh, it's fine, I'll just wear old clothes. And I'm like, no, your overalls are there to protect the environment from you, as opposed to you from the environment. So there's that kind of thing, and we make sure, like, the grape processing part is it. I mean, it is quite a kind of, what's the word? I suppose we're crushing grapes. We've got waste materials such as the stems and stuff going off. It's that at that stage of it, it's much less like we need to keep everything so clean because we've got lots of skins and things like that. So we're clean in between, as opposed to the bottling time, when that is like gloves and masks, and well, it didn't used to be masks, but it is now, and sterile filtering and stuff, that kind of thing. So yeah.
So what's the time scale? And so you've got these grapes, they've just been picked, they've came in on the pallet, it's all hands to the pumps, you're starting to produce them. How long do you have to keep it in, what, fermentation? What is that, the term?
Yeah. So if I was to talk about white wine making, because red wine is slightly different, we would crush and destem the grapes. So that's like exactly what it sounds like. So this goes through a machine and they're crushed, and then it goes into the press. Most of the juice drains out first without pressing it, so it just drains through and out, and we'll pump it into a big stainless steel tank. And then once most of that has happened, we'll make a decision about how much we want to press down, because there's decisions to be made around how much of the skin characteristic you want in that particular wine. So you think about the wine style, what you want it to taste like, therefore how much you want to press in order to get those characteristics. And we don't want to press too hard, because then you start getting astringency from the seeds and from the skins. We make a Bacchus, which is quite an aromatic variety, and that one means, when I say aromatic, it's got lots of fruit flavors that you want to keep in the final wine. So we use a kind of, want it to drain through the skins quite a lot to like release those flavors. Other wines, you might want them to be much more like, I don't want to say bland, that isn't the word I mean, but neutral in flavour. So things like if you're making sparkling wine and you're going to do the second fermentation and you want more of those yeasty flavours that you get with like champagne has a lot of yeasty flavours in, you actually don't want to get all that skin characteristic in, you just want it to be quite neutral. But we are making aromatic ones, so we are trying to get as much as we can out of that, but not so far that it ends up kind of astringent. And then it goes into the big tank, and then overnight we'll cool it down and maybe take a couple of days, all the solids kind of sink to the bottom. So imagine the difference between like cloudy apple juice and the clear apple juice. That's what happens over 2 days. And then we do something called racking, where you rack from one tank to another, and it just takes that clear juice, that nice clear juice off. And at that point, we've used a hydrometer to work out the specific gravity, which I'm now getting really technical, but all that means is we can work out how much sugar is in there that can be converted into alcohol by the yeast that we add. So at that point, we'll know the potential alcohol of the wine. In this country, we're allowed to add extra sugar if it's not quite ripe enough, because that is something we do struggle with in this country, is getting the grapes as ripe as possible. And it's completely permitted to add just normal sugar. I get mine from Buka. So although I'm not sponsored by Buka or anything like that, but that's basically where we get it from. It's just normal run-of-the-mill stuff. And I've only had to do that like a couple of times, to be honest, because we've had a couple of quite good years. But then we want to kind of aim for an alcohol level of like around 11. So we'd do that, and then we'd add the yeast, and then usually between 10 and 14 days later, you'll have your wine sorted, but it's all cloudy. It's got the yeast leaves in it. We need to let it settle. in contrast, the red wine, you wouldn't do the pressing until after the fermentation. So the fermentation happens with the skins floating on top of the kind of juice wine, fermenting wine, and you have to keep circulating it so that you can keep getting the flavour and the colour out of those skins. So it's like a totally different way of getting the flavour into the wine.
Oh, see, my mate Grant here is laughing at me because I asked those questions, and now you said all that. He's sitting there now. He's educated because I didn't know all that. So I'm sure Grant.
Well, it's funny because like this is one of the things we're going to start doing some tours and things, and these are the things that like as a winemaker and a site kind of chemistry geek, you do wonder like, do people want to know about this? But actually all I've had is this overwhelming kind of, yes, please, I'd love to know about that. So it's great because everyone's just so like interested in the process and how do you get from that? Something you wouldn't really think about, you're just sitting there drinking your glass of wine and then suddenly you're confronted with somebody who can tell you how it's made. And it's like, actually, that's one of the most interesting things, which I really enjoy doing that. Yeah.
It is, and it's funny because you live it like day in, day out, and it's like water off a duck's back or wine off a duck's whatever. For us, it is interesting, and actually, let's go back to a question that got here about this. Look, tell me about the phenols and the hangover-inducing chemicals.
The phenols and hangover-inducing, well, when I was studying the winemaking, one of the guys who was on my master's course, he was a retired guy, and he said, the only reason I'm here is to find out why we get hangovers from wine. And my tutor said, well, you're not going to find out about that. And I was like, and I think that's because, that was just the kind of banter that he liked to have. But it's really difficult to know what it is that would give people hangovers. Because a lot of people talk about clean wine, which is this new craze that, I don't really, I don't like to be negative about things, but some of that is nonsense, really. It's I think it just really depends on various factors, because I don't know about the chap who was asking the question, but I've had the same wine different times and drank the same amount of it, and I'll get a hangover from it sometimes and not at other times. So I think it depends on your own hydration levels, what else you've eaten with it, how quickly you drank it, that kind of thing. Because I have had that where I'll go, oh, I'm not having that again. That one was a real hangover inducer. But it's really difficult because certainly like my tutors were like, well, there's no particular one compound that'll cause it. But like the phenols in wine, so they're mainly in red wines. Phenols are what you'd find, the phenolic compounds are the ones that you find. Well, no, actually, that's not true. There are red wine, there are in white wine as well, but we think about them as the red wine ones because they're the things that give it the deep color, the structure, and the tannins. But they are in white wines as well, because But I wouldn't say there was anything in particular, like one particular chemical compound that induces hangovers. I think a lot of it is to do with the level of alcohol that they've got in it. Like a lot of red wines, for example, have got masses of alcohol now. They're like 15% and things like that. Like south of France and Australia, they're really high in alcohol, and that's obviously going to be something to dehydrate you and make you a bit. And because that's something that I've noticed about our white wines, because they're quite low in alcohol. Actually, our red wine is low; they're all low in alcohol. But we've only just launched our red wine, so I've got more kind of a sample size of the white ones. And I must say that I have had hangovers far less from our wines than other wines. And I'm not just saying that as a kind of promote ours. It's nothing to do with that. It's just more that the alcohols are lower, but also we use quite we don't really we don't try and intervene too much during the winemaking period. So we don't add a lot of things. We do add sulfites to kind of to preserve it, but they're really low, the levels of them. They're not high levels. They're well below the permitted levels that by the Food Standards Agency and that kind of thing. So I think I've probably gone around the houses to not even answer that question. So I'm sorry.
I've got one. You've said this a couple of times, and again, this is a real stupid question, but I love stupid questions. I do them really well. You've mentioned vintage.
Oh yeah.
How is it vintage when it's just quite a recent wine? What does vintage mean in wine terms?
all vintage means is the year it was made. So that's all. So so in champagne, quite often you'll get non-vintage. So it says non-vintage, and actually, like most of the common champagnes are non-vintage, and that's because they're permitted to blend wines from different years in order to standardise the flavour of it. So the likes of Laurent Perrier or Moet or people like that, they've got their own house style, and therefore they've got like 3 years of 3 different vintages of wine that they'll put into their non-vintage to make it taste the same all the time. When we talk about vintages in other wines, so if I stick with champagne because it's easier, vintage champagne is because the year was so good that they made it in that year. It's the same as kind of in Rioja when they've got Reserva and Grand Reserva. They won't always make the Reserva and the Grand Reservas. Those name tags are to do with how long you've oak aged it, but the decision's made that, oh, this is going to be a Grand Reserva vintage because it was so good. So there is a lot of things that kind of sit with the term vintage that make it sound like it must be better than something else, but all it means is the year that it was the grapes were picked and the wine was made. And you'd say, oh, like 2010 was a great Bordeaux vintage. That's it. And then but I think people do use it as like vintage Bordeaux because they're thinking about something old. But it's like it's kind of used in both ways.
So when you brew wine, what do you do?
Ferment
wine.
Ferment, yeah.
Not laughing, right? So when you ferment wine, it's literally in and out. So you haven't got this Grand Reserva kind of thing where you kind of it's sitting in barrels and it's done and it's bottled and it's out. Yeah.
Well, because with our white wines, the style of them, like New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, you'll generally see it was made within a year of you drinking it most of the time. It's to do with the style of the wine. It'll be similar in the likes of Sancerre and Pouilly-Fumé, who make Sauvignon Blanc in France. The style of that wine is, as I kind of said before, it's like that aromatic style that has the grape flavour is up there, which is only going to fade over time. So it'll probably be at its best kind of 6 months to a year, even 2 years and 3 years, it'll still be fine, but it's not getting better with age. Whereas those red wines, because of the way that they've been made, the way that the grapes grow, how they kind of need to age in either the oak or in the bottle once you've bottled it, because they need to like smooth down. We need to get those. So the tannins usually are quite short chain, and they need to do what's something called polymerization, which has just become longer chain tannins, which makes them smooth. So you might have the same wine 3 years apart, a red wine, and what's happened is it's just got really smooth because that's happened. Like those molecules have become longer. And so our white wines, make them, get them out, because that's the style. The red wine we've made, that one, we've experimented with how long it needed to be in oak for. We left it in oak barrels. This were used oak barrels, so old oak barrels, but for 4 months. And it means it doesn't have like a punchy kind of vanilla cedar kind of big oak flavour, but it does have something that's kind of integrated in with the fruit that's not, it's called a secondary flavour. So a primary flavour would be the fruit, so a secondary flavour from the oak. And you can taste it's like a smokiness in our red wine. It's not like a big bold, the first thing you taste is the oak, which often you would in, say, well, even Rioja, because they obviously oak age theirs in new oak often. So yeah.
And that secondary flavour, can you get that flavour from what was ever in the oak barrel before your wine?
It's no, because usually you would have like cleaned them and get them clean, nice and clean. What you're trying to do with the oak is you get some of the oak flavour, but the other thing it does is it lets a very slow ingress of oxygen into the wine, and oxygen's usually like well, certainly with the white wines, the aromatic white wines, it's not a friend. So we try and keep it away, because the oxygen will react with those flavour molecules and it'll change them to be something you don't want. So it'll either come out kind of much more like pear drops or paint thinner or vinegar even. That's what the oxygen will do. But if you put it in an oak barrel, it will allow it to like slowly get in there, and that's what helps with those reactions in the wine to kind of soften them, lower the acids down a bit, and kind of make all the flavors more integrated.
You see this? Look, people are keen for tours. Our Peter there.
So we actually, because we did one before lockdown. It was our test one, and then the lockdown happened, so obviously we're closed for that. And we've got one planned for the 19th of September. And AAA Food Tours are helping us run it, so that like it kind of takes. It's going to have like food and things like that, but also we can work collaboratively to try and make sure it's a safe environment and things like that, because we don't have a separate room. We've only got the winery. We're going to have to think through like that kind of thing. So we're doing one of them on the 19th of September, and then we'll shut down and we'll do all our grape processing. We'll have 6 weeks or maybe longer where we'll be grape processing and then fermenting the wine, be in tank. And then after that, we'll hopefully open back up again and do some tours on the run up to Christmas. So I think it's going to be a busy time.
And you're going to do an industry angel tour just for us.
Yeah.
I've allowed you to flex your chemistry muscles there. Let's go back to it. Was awesome, and this is the interesting thing. This is why people want tours, because it is really interesting. Grant, I'm going to have to get my books out again though, and brush refresh my memories. I know. So the chemical muscles. Then let's look at your business muscles. So Grant's asking here: are you importing, exporting wine? How's that going?
We aren't exporting yet. So all our wine's English. All the grapes have come from England. And we make all the wine on site. We don't import anybody else's wine, and we don't import other grapes or anything like that. We are looking into exporting, and it's one of those difficult things, because you kind of weighing up that idea of like, well, where's your market? So the market, I'd say probably not mainland Southern Europe, because they make a lot of wine already. There's a lot of wine that's very good quality that is probably lower in price than our wines, because it's much cheaper to make wine over there, and they're much more established and things like that, and they probably don't have as high duty and VAT and things like that we do. So the idea of export, and unless we were going to like expat communities and people really wanted stuff from up here, but what I would be looking at is the likes of kind of not Australia, America and China. But then with it being alcohol, it's much more tricky, because there are a lot of costs involved in that. So I am exploring that with the Department of International Trade. Hopefully we'll get there sometime. Yeah.
Excellent. We've got our Katie's asked a question here, and she's saying, really enjoyed learning about your exciting journey, Elise. Which wine from your place would you recommend trying first?
So this is a tricky one, because our best-selling and most successful wine is our Bacchus, and we've barely got any left. So so I would recommend trying that one, because like that one's won. Actually, that one won a silver medal at WineGB and a bronze medal at the International Wine and Spirits competition this year, and it's also the one that's sold in Fortnum and Mason. And the reason why we've not got much left this year is because we sold a lot of it to Fortnum and Mason, for them to have their own label wine. So if you go on Fortnum's website, their Bacchus was made by us, and it's got their labels on. So the Bacchus is, what I've found with wine, I'm going to kind of go off track a little bit here, but what I found with our winemaking is that in England, in general, it'll be grape varieties you haven't heard of that make the best still wines, because those grapes are suited to this climate, and our climate is so marginal compared with other countries. What we've done is like they've found the right hybrid grape varieties, and well, not just hybrid grape varieties, but other grape varieties that grow well in this country and are resistant to disease. So this is to do with the bud. When the vine buds, it buds in March, April time. Well, April time, yeah. And the later it'll bud, the better, because we have such late frosts. I don't know if anyone remembers, but we had a beautiful, beautiful March and April this year, and then we had a horrible frost in May, and that took out like 40% of some people's vineyards in this country because the frost just killed the buds. So growing grape varieties that bud later is important, and then things that are also important are being able to kind of ripen up even with not having that much sun. So Bacchus does that, it's great. And then there's another one which is basically hanging on you can hang it on the vines for longer, deeper into the autumn, because they're disease resistant. So something like Saval Blanc, which is what we make our fizz. We've got a fizz called This Mortal Angel, and we make that out of Saval Blanc. That one's disease resistant because it's been bred that way. So they've bred the vine to. So white wine, Bacchus, red wine, Regent, sparkling wine out of Saval Blanc, and most people won't have heard of any of those grape varieties. But we make a Pinot Gris, so it's called Pinot G or Pinot Grigio. And that'll be the one that people will most likely gravitate towards because they know the grape variety, they know it. And people are really excited because we're going to make a Pinot Noir this year, but we're quite good at growing Pinot Noir in this country. But the Pinot Gris, I made that in 2018 when it was a great growing season. But usually you'd put that in sparkling wine because in sparkling wine you want to use like less ripe grapes. It's so difficult because one of the aspects of grape ripening isn't just the sugar levels coming up, it's the acid coming down. So we have to find the perfect moment to pick them. That's why you have to have a trustworthy grape grower who knows when that is. So trust that person to be able to pick them at the right moment. So I would recommend our Pinot Gris because you'll have a frame of reference. But we don't make that every year because it doesn't always ripen up enough to make it into still wine in this country. So there's my long-winded answer about English wine. Generally, if you don't know what the grape variety is, it doesn't mean that it's a bad wine. What it means is that grape variety grows really well in this country because we've got a marginal climate.
Bryn just asks here about investment wine. He's been asked to kind of invest in wine. What are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, there's a lot of kind of wine investment goes on. I think that it's a shame to make wine into a commodity in that way. But it can reap benefits. But I think what happens is, it means you get quite inflated prices of certain wines. So the likes of, we've done this before. You can buy en premier Bordeaux wines when it's been a really good vintage. Using that word again, they come up and someone will taste this really young wine and then decide that that's going to be worth a fortune in the future, and so you go in and you'd buy it like buying shares as opposed to something you want to look forward to drinking. I think it's fine but you never see the product, so it's just a bit like buying property in that sense, and never living in it. Like property that you would only ever rent out, it's the same as that. It's not something, it's a completely different thing than buying wine to drink. And I don't think I would do it because I just find it kind of distorts the market slightly because it makes those wines so much more expensive, and then it does kind of make this two-tier system of wines in that you've got these ones that you're literally never going to be able to buy because you just can't or drink. Sorry, you could buy them for investment because you're going to sell them on, but you're never going to drink them because you're drinking your investment. So, yeah, I don't know.
I've got some really old whiskies and I've got some, vintage champagnes, and they might as well be filled with water, the bottles, because I haven't drank them. It's just criminal. I'm going to go home and drink them.
I know I've got a bottle of Sauterne, so dessert wine that when I left my job in London, my team bought for me, and it was a full bottle. So you usually get like dessert wines in half bottles, and it was a 750 ml bottle, and we moved away, and it's still in the fridge because I'm like, well, when am I going to drink a full bottle? Oh, well, I should just have a dessert wine party, shouldn't I? But yeah, I think, and I'm like, well, is that still going to be okay? Because now it's 2005 it was made, I think, so it's quite old, but hopefully it'll be fine. But one thing that I have done in the past, actually, which is interesting, is bought on Premier dessert wines for a christening. So as a christening present, because you'd get them and then you give them the bottles to the person because they were born in that year that wine was made, and they can have it when they're 18 or whatever. They might not even like dessert wine, but I always found that to be quite a nice thing because you could give them a couple of bottles and the rest you might be able to sell on for a bit of money.
Nice touch. Well, listen, before we go, it would be remiss if we didn't start to talk about your Kickstart, your crowdfund, or whatever you're going through, because you're looking for investment, aren't you? Looking to get some money together. I know we had a chat this morning. You've got a few different angles where you've got money to come into the business. What are you looking for, Elise? Tell us all about that.
So I started a crowdfunder on crowdfunder.co.uk. It's because we are wanting to expand. So that very thing I was talking about earlier, which was the idea of covering your overheads. We want to expand. We want to make more bottles. So but because that means buying more grapes up front, we don't have the cash flow for that. So it's a very difficult kind of situation to be in. You have to buy more tanks and buy more grapes to make yourself bigger in order to then sell the bottles next year or the year after. So it's just a bit of a working capital conundrum like you have with a winery. We looked at investment and things like that, and because of the kind of lockdown and things have just been so busy, and we decided that the best route to go down was to try to do a reward-based crowdfunder, because we've got a product, we've got things we can give as rewards. It's quite exciting stuff. There's winery tours on there, there's discounts for life, there's t-shirts and wine special edition labels and that kind of thing that we can do with a crowdfunder. So we decided just to kind of do that so we can get our extra cash in to buy the extra grapes for this coming harvest, which is in about a month's time. So we've only got one day left though, so it's finishing tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We've done pretty well. It's a keep what you raise one, but basically because we are a running business, we're going, like whatever money we do raise, we'll be able to use and we'll still be able to expand. So we had a target and yeah, we'd love to get to that, but yeah. So I feel like I'm not selling it very well.
I'm going to do it for you because I love what you're doing and I'm really excited about it. We've got it in the region here. So if people jump onto that URL there, Laneberg Wine, and there's a link down to your crowdfunder in there. Right. Tell me about some of the rewards and what could some of our viewers, our listeners.
So the smallest amount reward is £20, and that gets you 5% off for life and your name on a plaque on a tank, and then it goes up like 50, 100, and 500 and upwards. But you can give like any amount in between, and the rewards kind of just stack up like that. So £50 you'd get wine and a winery tour for 2 people included. 100 you'd get a limited edition label on top of all those other things.
Awesome.
£500 we're going to do a special barrel, either a special barrel for red, and where you'll get bottles of that special barrel, one specific donor barrel will have a special label on, and we'll do a similar thing with white. Obviously, well, not obviously, but we don't oak age our white, so we we'll take that from the tank. But yeah, and it goes up like that. And if anybody like is feeling really flush and has, I think it's 2,500, you get to be a winery hand for the day during our grape processing time. So
So hold on. They pay you to work.
Yeah, I know.
Fantastic. I love that. What a great business model. I love that.
It's a great experience though. And you wouldn't really have much responsibility other than just like, getting involved in the great in the great day. So
fantastic. I'm really excited for this journey. It's only in its infancy, but you seem to have moved really quickly and accomplished quite a lot already. And you brushed over that. I just Fortnum and Mason are selling our wine really easily. And I had a load of questions in there. How does that actually happen? How do you get that? And go on, quickly answer before you go. How does that happen? Where did that contract come from?
Fortnum and Mason, the wine buying team down there, they had heard from us probably because we put some wines into kind of a few wine tastings down in London last year, just to kind of get known within the kind of industry. They decided to pick 40 different wines across a few different wineries in the whole of England, and then narrowed it down, and decided to pick between us, our Bacchus, our 2019 Bacchus. I even had to send them a sample out of the tank, so it wasn't even finished wine. So we just put some in a bottle and sent it to them. And it was us versus, I don't know who, but a well-established English winery who would have been very easy for them to go with because, much easier for them in terms of logistics and that kind of thing. And they went with us because they really loved our wine, and a lot of it was to do with loving the story as well. So it was incredible. I was like, "What? How is this happening? A second vintage, and this is going on." But it's where we wanted to be. So I'm delighted. It wasn't beyond my ambition, but it was definitely happened a lot quicker than I imagined.
It's totally exciting. You got some great comments here. Everyone's thoroughly enjoyed this one. I have as well.
Thank you.
I know we've organised this one really quickly because we found out it was your Kickstarter tomorrow. So we're like, right, okay, let's get it on a Monday and let's see what we can do. So I suggest everybody jumps on to Laneberg Wine and support this local business, which is fantastic. And they've even named a wine after us, this Mortal Angel.
Yes.
Yeah, I see what I did there. So Elise, thanks so much. It's been absolutely marvelous to have you on. Are you on social media? Can we follow the company anywhere?
Yes, we're on Facebook, Instagram, at Laneberg Wine, and I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. So Elise Lane on LinkedIn, and I think my Twitter is at Laneberg Wine as well, actually. But yeah. Yep,
great stuff. Well, you might have some messages later on tonight, and again, look at all this. Great interviews. I've learned a lot about wine. I have as well, Suki. I've learned a lot about wine. So we'll be jumping on for a tour very soon.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, Elise, thank you so much. Best luck with everything and keep in touch, and we might have you back on in a year or two time. See what's happened.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Cheers, Elise. Bye now.
Bye.
There you go. Another fantastic, interesting journey from a local company, which is brilliant. I love to have our local friends on. Share this if you've enjoyed it. As I say, we've quickly threw this together because the crowdfunder is tomorrow. So I wanted to try and get this out today quickly. So you probably haven't had a heads up, an email or social media or an event created. We've just threw it out quick because that's what we do. We're super agile. So well done, Misha, for organizing all of that. If you've enjoyed it, as I say, please share it out. If you're going to leave a review, let me know so I can help you get a shout out to you. And looking forward to the next live broadcast. We're not sure what's in the pipeline just yet. We've got a lot of things going on. We're coming up to the 200th episode, would you believe? So we're going to look for something special for that. So until next time, I'm Ian Farrar. This is the Industry Angel.